Is conference realignment ruining college football?
So I might be a little bit biased being the college football expert, right? I'm going to say that no, it is not ruining college football, but it is certainly altering the landscape as we've known it for a long time. And what it's doing is it's taking away some of these old traditional rivalries that we've become accustomed to looking forward to in the fall. But it's not taking away all the fun of the sport, right? Like the pageantry that exists within college football is not going away. Saturdays on college campuses with tailgating, with marching bands, with cheerleaders, with, big matchups, like none of that is leaving. The opponent from week to week, season to season is going to look a little different. But, we're still going to have so much that makes us love college football. So, we're going to lose a little bit of that like geographical or regional aspect of the sport. And some of like these conferences that have had identities based on the style of play is going to be changing a little bit. But I think it's still going to be great. And what's really interesting, the way I was thinking about it today is like, we're no longer going to have these regional rivalries, but we're going to have like Rose Bowl games now on a regular basis. The way that the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have merged, like what used to be a once in a year, maybe once in a decade type matchup between like a Washington and a Wisconsin is now going to happen like once every few years or whatever. So that'll be an exciting change in and of itself.
JT?
I mean, you expect me to argue with the expert? I mean, that's why you got to go in first.
You better not.
I mean, let's be honest. Will there still be games on Saturday, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Are you still going to be able to see your favorite team and players play, yes or no?
Yep.
All right, cool. So, I mean, nothing. It's not ruining college football. If anything, it's giving the teams that are not in the SEC an opportunity to maybe, get a championship. So that's going to make more fans, interested in watching it, throughout the year. But I feel like as long as there's games, our players that we want to see players still playing, it doesn't matter about the realignment. I know people are all up in arms about, the rivalry games disappearing. But I mean, to be honest, this new generation, I don't think they care as much about rivalry week as, maybe some of the older generation does. So I think it'll sting at first. But hey, look, if I'm not playing, Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State, but that means I get to go to a national championship or the playoffs, then I'm all for that. So I don't think it'll be a problem. People will just complain at first and then they'll be used to it, down the road in 2 years.
Coach Cassidy, I know it's been a while since you've been on the show, but don't fall for JT's traps where he'll answer a question with giving 3 questions, right? Don't fall for that. But I agree with both of you. No, it's not ruining.
See, that's just his way to say he agrees with me. Anytime that I say something that is correct, he's gonna,
I know,
step on it and then be like, say, all right, he's right, and say the same thing. We know your tricks by now.
No, I agreed with the answer and the analysis of our expert, not necessarily with what you said. But I agree, it's not ruining college football. And actually, I'm looking long term here. I think it's going to force schools and college football teams to get on the same page in terms of what college football will look like, in the future. And I agree, Connor. Like, yes, some of those traditional rivalries may go away, but if those teams and schools and presidents of the universities really truly do want those rivalries, those can continue. There's no doubt that Oklahoma can still play Oklahoma State. Look at Miami and Florida State, our 2 teams, right? Like we've got the Miami gear on, you've got the ugly Florida State gear on. But you look at that, when Miami was in the Big East, Florida State in the ACC, they played every year. And those were some of the best games, actually better games than when they both were in the same conference, because it mattered maybe even more. So I think that can still exist if those particular schools in those rivalries still want it. So I had mentioned that I think the schools will be forced to look into the future to maybe change some things. So Connor, what does college football look like to you in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think basically college sports, but college football, especially since it's the one driving the change, continues down this path towards professionalization. And I think what it's going to do is going to concentrate the programs with the most resources and the willingness to spend the resources around football. And, I think, unfortunately, maybe to the detriment of some of the other college sports. But so I hope what takes place is that like the college football programs that are most invested coalesce and consolidate and essentially like break off from everything else and be their own entity. And then, I think what might also take place is that some of the programs that have been a part of these like power conferences will actually get sort of pushed aside. Some of the schools that aren't willing to like really pony up the most amount of money or don't have the alumni support or the financial resources, or really just sort of like the bandwidth to have football on like this professional like scale.
Nice. JT?
I'm really upset and disappointed with you. Not you, Coach, but Don, because he knows that, here on this show, we're supposed to vet people before they come on. And he tricked me. He gave me all these great credentials, and he's like, your stuff, what you do, and we've seen this year after year. But I'm hearing this differently coming from an FSU fan, which I did not know you were. And like, this is very hard for me to sit back and hear you give good analysis, knowing that I hate that shirt that you have on, and I hate saying that you're right even more. But I'm going to keep it simple. I agree with everything you just said. 5 to 10 years, let's just keep it simple. It's going to look like college basketball. Less emphasis on regular season importance, and everyone's going to have a bigger chance to get to the big dance, which is going to make it more exciting, and the fan bases are going to be more locked in. So that's where I think it's going to go. More playoff appearances, more opportunities for championships, and it's just going to mirror March Madness. It might not be to that extent where we're looking at 64 teams, but the equivalent of 64 teams in a football setting.
Yeah, I agree with you, Coach Cassidy, not necessarily JT.
It's okay. You can say you agree with me too. Yes, I know it's just making you pissed off, but hey, look, just say it. Hold on, time out. For everyone watching, say JT, I agree with you too.
So Connor, I agree with you.
He can't do
that. I've been saying it for years, and I know JT knows this. They've got to break off and become separate entities, just like universities have hospitals systems that are separate entities, right? Like, yes, it goes under, like, for example, Miami has the U Health. We know in Pittsburgh, they have what's called UPMC. Those are, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. The U Health is under University of Miami umbrella, but they're separate entities. So they don't fall into some of the restrictions that in the red tape that the university falls under, things that fall under the university, for example, the NCAA, or what, the school falls under with federal things. So this would allow them to separate from the NCAA. And I think the way we're going, maybe not in 5 years, but more like 10, pay players, is going to be contracts, salary caps. They're going to be its own minor league system to the NFL, but still be tied to the school. So they don't lose the branding. They don't lose those fans, and they still have the tradition and pageantry of college football. And if you go over the cap, major penalties, just like in the NFL. And if a booster pays someone under the table, I mean, that would be something where that would be consequences that would be devastating to the player, the coaches, and the school and the university, I should say, the team, not necessarily the school. And I think what it's going to look like is regions, divisions, kind of a mix of the NFL with the playoffs, one and done, but the World Cup in a sense where, hey, out of this region, the top 2 teams advance, and then that third team that has the best record, between all of the different regions ends up getting in the playoffs as well. So it's not you just need to win your division. It can be accumulation of the top 2, maybe the top 3, the top 2 with multiple third wild cards, just like you see in pool play, like in the World Cup. I think that's the way it ends up going, and that may level the playing field. So Cincinnati can come out of like the Midwest, and only Alabama and like Texas A&M can come out of the South. So something like that. Do want to throw up this one. Jason Curtis, thanks again for listening and watching. Some rivalries are getting revived. He mentioned Texas and Texas A&M. That's true. So for some of those that said, the rivalries are going to go away, well, it went away when Texas A&M moved, but now with Texas moving, that one comes back. So doesn't completely ruin all of the rivalries. So good point by Jason. Thank you again. So Coach, name one team that can benefit from these conference realignments and one team that suffers the most.
So I think the teams that benefit are the ones who are kind of like riding the coattails of the biggest brands. So I think about like Washington. Like if you look at the last couple decades or so, Washington's maybe been like 4th place in the Pac-12. But what they're doing is they're riding on like Oregon and USC and UCLA, and they're getting invited into the Big Ten. And so a program like that is now going to get like all the financial windfall that is going to come from the Big Ten revenue and use that to continue to enhance their program. But like they themselves weren't necessarily like the hottest brand in that conference realignment. And then I think the losers will be teams that maybe are not willing to put forth all that it's going to take to compete at the highest level. And I think especially about like the elite academic schools that are like right now Power 5 schools like Northwestern or Vanderbilt or Duke. Like, are they going to want to pony up the cash and resources to compete with Florida State, Miami, Alabama, Ohio State, those blue blood brand names. And then I think also just like a team that's sort of, on the perimeter of the conferences as they stand now. I think of teams like Maryland and Rutgers who have lived through one conference realignment, but like, are they really going to be able to compete in this new, even more powerful conference? And like, what does that look like to them when you bring in like, 4 or 5 really quality teams?
That's a great point. That's going to be interesting because a lot of people look at the teams that are moving instead of the teams that are already in a conference that are adding schools and teams. So that's actually an interesting view on that. JT?
I mean, it's hard to argue with that answer, but I'm going to try. So the teams that will benefit the most are those big programs that are already big and dominate their regions and recruiting that are going to the SEC. So I'm looking at people like Oklahoma and Texas. Like, they've dominated that region in college football recruiting since Don was born, like in the 70s. So they've been doing this a long time. And you look at what it did to Texas A&M. Like, Texas A&M is getting all the talent in the world and winning 5 games. And kids still want to go there, and I don't get it. So imagine what Texas and Oklahoma will do with SEC backing. So those are the teams that I think are going to have the biggest improvement and advantage. Now, disadvantage, you want to go ahead and sit up a little bit so we can see that shirt? I think it's teams like FSU because, one, I have to see where they end up. And here's the difference between FSU and, let's say, Miami, because I put us both in the same boat. The difference is our program is willing to pump money into winning, where FSU has gotten by with sort of like the money ball scheme of college football, getting in the transfer portal. Our boosters are not paying the most money, so we're going to, pay money to guys to stay a little bit longer and not go to the draft. And with conference realignment, that's going to be out the window. And I think people don't understand the culture of FSU and how much the boosters not willing to do what it takes financially has played in stifling their development. Like, that's why Jimbo's in with the Aggies and not still with you guys, because he tried to tell you, look, it's a pay-to-play game. We're behind with facilities, with paying players and whatnot and investing into the program. And you guys are lucky to be where you are now because of the portal and because you guys were able to get a coach like Norvell, who wasn't a marquee name, took less money, and it's happened to work out. But look at the future. Like, what happens when this group of guys leaves? Like Verse, Travis, like, how do you guys restock that without pumping more money into the program through the boosters? So I think it'll hurt teams like FSU that have ridden the fence and been cheap when this whole conference realignment thing happens. The difference is Miami, we've shown, like, hey, Nevin Shapiro's in our blood. We'll throw the money out there to get it done. We just got to get the right guys to come to our program.
Well, we don't say that name around these parts.
Hey, look, man.
We don't say that.
I just watched the U cartoon last night again, man. Look, I want to get back to those days. I don't know how we do it.
We didn't win anything.
Look, we had the wrong coach, but we were getting top recruits. We have good coaches now. I want those players back. I want me and Randy Phillips is like, look, man, I want to go out there and lay it all on the line. I need that swagger back. This is how we do it. We got to go get those guys.
Well, Coach Cassidy, you're not supposed to laugh at JT at his jokes when he tries to take a shot.
Yeah, it's funny you're saying that.
That's not allowed.
You try to act like you don't laugh at anything I say. Like, I know you don't like the things that I say, but you laugh at mostly everything I say.
And it's funny, JT, you're just agreeing with him tonight. Like you're probably not even listening to what he's saying. And you just, I agree. I mean, I wish you would do that with some of the things I said.
Well, if you say stuff that makes sense, I would agree with you.
I do. So listen to this one.
No, you don't.
The one team that can benefit.
You said Mason Rudolph was going to be a Hall of Fame player. How could I ever trust you with information and advice?
When did I say that? Pull up your tape. We have this is episode 144. Pull up the other 143. So Cincinnati is going to benefit, right? They already made a playoff without being in a Power 5, and they probably needed some help, even though they went undefeated because other teams lost. Right now, they've already been the one. They starting to have that name recognition. Now you put them in a Power 5. If they go undefeated out of the Big 12, they should be in the playoffs. They don't need anyone to lose or falter in a championship game. And even if they lose one game, if they end up running the table in the Big 12 this year while Texas and Oklahoma are still in there with one loss, they might get in the playoffs. The team that I think hurts the most right now from what I see it in terms of the move, the teams that have moved, is UCLA. Like, I'm not sure the last time they've had that great of a team. And now, how are you going to win a Big Ten title? Like, you can't even win the Pac-12. And it's going to be tough to recruit because you're not going in the Midwest and winning those recruiting battles. You can't even do it out West because USC and Oregon are winning those battles. So I don't see how that's going to help UCLA. I understand the TV contract much better than the Pac-12 contract, but other than that, I think it's a loose situation for UCLA. So I think they're going to suffer the most on the field where let's be honest, for us three, that's where it matters the most, right? Like, we're not worried about how much a school makes or how it looks. Like, we care about wins and losses on the field as fans. And I think that's the team that's going to hurt the most is UCLA, even with Chip Kelly, who's, been turning it around there.